The transport of materials within societies made its appearance in ants long before humans appeared on the face of the earth. It's almost universally true among ants that only a fraction of the workers leave the nest to forage, bringing back food to their nest mates. This harvester ant is no exception. The workers you see on the surface are foragers or sand carriers. To judge by their color, these are older workers. To find out where in the nest workers of different ages, as judged by their color, resided, we excavated a number of nests. We collected all the ants in every chamber. The upper chambers were occupied by large numbers of dark-colored workers,
so
indicating
you can
that
see
they
we've
were
exposed
older.
the uppermost chambers here. They're just under the ground surface.
The uppermost chambers are quite complex and are shaded in this image. Chambers become smaller and simpler with depth. All workers from the uppermost chambers are dark and therefore older. Deeper chambers are smaller and simpler. Nests can be over 2 meters deep, and it takes a lot of digging to excavate an entire nest. We encountered the first seed chambers at middle depth, at 43 centimeters in this case. The deeper we went, the greater the proportion of workers that were light brown to buttery in color. These are younger workers, also called callows. Once we started encountering brood, we were in the bottom third of the nest. The queen is usually, but not always, in one of the very deepest chambers. Two and a half meters.
So the young workers in the brood are in the, say, the bottom third, and then the middle-aged workers in the middle, and the old workers near the top. And the seeds are also placed in the same levels, around 50 to 100 centimeters below ground surface. So the colony has a vertical social structure, from young to old. And that probably serves division of labor, because young workers take care of the brood, so they're down where the brood is in the bottom, and as they age, they do more general nest duties, processing seeds and those kinds of things. And only the oldest workers go out to forage for seeds and to defend the nest. So the movement from the bottom to the top corresponds with the changes in the jobs they do.
Foragers are simply defined operationally as those workers that leave the nest, pick up a piece of food, and return it back to the nest. But how are these foragers distributed within the nest? Do they bring the food directly to the larvae below? By collecting foragers on seed or cookie crumb baits, Christina Kwapich, working with me, marked foragers with fluorescent printer's ink and released them back into the nest. The marked workers were easily detected under ultraviolet light. Marked foragers were never found below about 10 to 15 centimeters, that is, the very top or 2 or 3 chambers just under the surface. They formed a separate population that had little contact with the workers and brood for whom they collected food. This separation is probably adaptive, preventing pathogens and parasites carried accidentally by foragers from contaminating the nest. A similar arrangement is found in the garbage workers and leafcutter ants. These workers will even be attacked if they try to enter the nest. Even human societies have made such arrangements. In feudal Japan, the Eto, the lowest caste, carried out the most unsanitary work. They were designated as untouchables and forced to live. So the question is, if foragers that bring food and seeds into the nest never venture deeper than about 10 centimeters, and the seeds are stored at mid-depth, 50 to 100 centimeters, and most of the consumers of prey and seeds are the larvae that live mostly in this zone, the bottom third of the nest, then how do the prey and seeds get from the very top of the nest to the storage and consumers? So there must be another group of workers that overlap with foragers in the top of the nest and are specialized to transport food and seed downward, a sort of ant delivery system. To answer this question, it was necessary to mark 100% of the foragers in a nest. Nicholas Hanley and I baited, collected, and marked. After 2 or more days of baiting and marking, no more unmarked workers came to the baits. In other words, 100% of the foragers were now marked. Upon opening the top chambers of the nest, we found many unmarked workers mingling with marked foragers. These were the candidates for the transfer workers because they shared space with the foragers. We separated the unmarked workers from the marked foragers and marked them with a different color. In capturing and marking these workers, we had destroyed the upper 2 or 3 chambers and therefore replaced them with facsimiles cut out of styrofoam. We traced the outline of each chamber and then cut a replacement out of styrofoam. And added an acetate roof to each. These artificial chambers were then buried in place of the ones we had destroyed. Finally, we even added back the charcoal to restore the original condition. We returned the marked ants to this reconstructed nest, and they used it without hesitation, as if it were their original nest. 2 or 3 days later, we excavated the nest and looked for the 2 colors of marked workers at all levels. Once we had developed this process, Nicholas Hanley completed 10 replicants of this experiment. The ants had used our replacement chambers just as they had used their own. This suggests that our procedure had not been excessively traumatic. Chambers were excavated one by one down to the bottom of the nest. The black ants are adult males. Contents of each chamber were brought back to the lab for processing. Under ultraviolet light, foragers and transfer workers were easily identified and counted. The results: Foragers were never found below about 15 centimeters, but transfer workers occurred even down to the deepest chambers. This is evidence that the transfer workers range throughout the vertical nest and are a good candidate for the delivery business that connects the foragers at the top of the nest with the consumers and the seed storage below. But are the goods actually moved quickly from the top to deep in the nest? Is this really UPS underground? As a test, we offered colonies seeds marked with fluorescent printer's ink. The dyed seeds appeared quickly in the seed storage chambers as well as in transit to these chambers. The next test was to offer the colony pieces of beetle larvae that had been dyed with rhodamine B. It took little time for many larvae deep in the nest to fluoresce under UV light because they had been fed on the dyed food. Callow workers fluoresced as much as did larvae. Either they have a similar diet or they are intermediaries in feeding the larvae. It's also clear that dyed beetle pieces were moved downward in the nest all the way to the chambers with larvae. We replanted all the nests we had dug up and followed the forager population over a few weeks, noting the color mark of foragers that came to baits. Over several weeks, the proportion of workers marked as foragers decreased and that of those marked as transfer workers increased. This shows that transfer workers are a younger group than foragers and become foragers as they age. In conclusion, then, we have established a distinct group of middle-aged workers that act as delivery agents between the foragers dropping food at the top of the nest and the larvae and callows consuming that food at the bottom. This division of labor system is based on the continuous production of new workers at the bottom of the nest, their upward movement and changed behavior with age, and finally their death as foragers.